a thing that comes into it from having read the book a few times. You read the book a few times and, yeah, it's just like the resurrection of the Christ. They kept part of the Bible's ending out of sight, and it may not be what we've always believed. For generations, billions of people thought they were reading the complete story, the final message, the ultimate warning about how everything ends. But what if that story was never whole to begin with? What if entire sections, detailed visions, timelines, and unsettling warnings were quietly removed long before the text reached us? Now, Mel Gibson has sparked fresh curiosity around this idea in a way few saw coming. He points to the Ethiopian Bible, suggesting it contains a version of the end times that is more vivid, more precise, and far more intense than what appears in most modern Bibles. If that's true, it raises a powerful question. Have we been reading an incomplete ending all along? This isn't just about minor translation differences or wording changes. It's about entire sections, passages said to include words spoken after the resurrection, describing a future so intense and unsettling that some believe they were intentionally left out of the wider narrative. So why Ethiopia? How did this ancient version survive largely unchanged, while others were edited, revised, and shaped over time? And more importantly, what does it contain that might have been seen as too controversial or too powerful for the rest of the world to hear? Because if there's any truth to this, then what we've been taught about the end may only be part of a much bigger story. Before we go any further, take a second to like and subscribe, because what you're about to hear isn't something everyone is eager to talk about. For nearly 2,000 years, Christians have heard the same core message. Jesus rose from the dead, appeared to his followers, and left behind a promise of salvation. But in Ethiopia, some of the oldest Christian writings tell a much deeper and far more unsettling version of what Jesus said. One that most people in the West have never encountered. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church preserves one of the oldest and most complete biblical traditions in the world. Within it are texts that were never included in the canon of the Roman Church. Writings that claim to record what Jesus taught after his resurrection, including a detailed vision of the end times that goes far beyond what's described in the book of Revelation. For centuries, Ethiopian monks protected these texts, carefully copying them by hand to ensure they would never be lost. To them, these words mattered deeply, not because they were comforting, but because they were warnings. In these writings, Jesus doesn't simply leave the world behind. Instead, he lays out a vivid picture of what lies ahead. He describes a final age with striking detail, a time when the human spirit grows cold, when truth is replaced by spectacle, and when leaders appear righteous on the outside, while their actions harm the very people they claim to serve. One of the most talked about writings in this tradition is often called the Book of the Covenant. It's said to record what Jesus shared with his disciples during the 40 days after his resurrection, before his ascension. And in this account, the message about the end times isn't vague. It's strikingly direct. According to the text, the final age doesn't begin with dramatic fire from the sky, but with something quieter and more troubling, the slow fading of human conscience. It describes a generation that knows Jesus' name, but no longer understands his voice. People will gather in grand places of worship, but the spirit behind it, the text suggests, may already be gone. It also warns that deception won't come from faraway places. It will rise from within. False teachers, it says, will appear even inside institutions built in his name. They'll speak about heaven while chasing power and influence here on earth. The message is clear. When faith is used to justify harm, greed, or silence those in need, something has gone deeply wrong. The focus then shifts to the world itself. The text describes natural upheavals, earthquakes, floods, and strange signs in the sky that leave even the wisest people searching for answers. But instead of calling these punishments, it presents them as signals. like the early pains before something new begins. It suggests that the earth reacts to what's coming, even when humanity doesn't recognize it. What makes these words so striking is how relevant they feel today. One passage describes Jesus looking at his disciples and telling them not to fear the shaking of the ground, but to fear something deeper, the stillness of hearts that have grown completely cold. Another Ethiopian text, sometimes referred to as the Didaskalia, builds on this idea and adds yet another layer to the prophecy, expanding the picture of what these final days might look like. These writings describe Jesus warning his followers about a final kind of empire, not one built on obvious occult or etc., but a system so vast and subtle that most people wouldn't even realize they were living inside it. According to the text, this empire wouldn't rely on chains. Instead, it would offer comfort. It would provide food, distraction, and entertainment, and call that freedom. The message goes even deeper. It suggests that those who recognize the illusion and still choose truth and compassion are the ones truly awake. In a world overflowing with surface-level abundance, the real challenge becomes holding on to what is genuine and meaningful. If these hidden end-times teachings preserved within the Ethiopian Bible carry any truth, they could completely reshape how we understand the final days. And it raises a bigger question. What other warnings might still be hidden within some of the world's oldest and most mysterious spiritual texts? These same writings also paint a powerful picture of what the last days might feel like from the inside. They describe a time when truth doesn't come from places of power, but from the unexpected. From the overlooked, the forgotten, even those pushed to the edges of society. The idea is that the most important voices may not be the loudest or the most recognized. There's also a striking warning. The people who believe they are most prepared may actually be the least aware when the moment arrives. It flips many familiar ideas about the end times on their head, challenging comfortable assumptions and easy answers. Part of the reason these texts survived comes down to Ethiopia's unique history. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church has existed since the 4th century, and for long periods, it remained isolated from Rome. Because of that distance, it preserved a version of these teachings that is often described as more complete and more mystical. In these Ethiopian writings, the end times aren't just a series of external disasters. They're described as something much deeper, a spiritual struggle that takes place within each person. The idea is that the final battle isn't fought between armies, but within the human heart itself. According to these writings, the real conflict of the final age isn't between nations or armies. It's internal. It's a struggle between truth and the comfort of easy living, between awakening and the quiet drift of people who feel satisfied, but disconnected. Some Ethiopian traditions suggest there are 3 main reasons why this version of the end times message didn't become widely accepted in the West. First is control. The idea is that church authorities in Rome favored teachings that kept people dependent on institutions for guidance and salvation. A message claiming that the Spirit of God could move beyond those structures, reaching ordinary, humble people directly, was seen as too disruptive. Second is mysticism. These Ethiopian texts are filled with vivid imagery, visions, angelic gatherings, and complex timelines. Many Western leaders viewed such elements with suspicion and labeled them as unorthodox or even heretical. Third is fear, real fear. The concern was that if people truly absorbed these teachings, They might start to believe that the end times weren't some distant future event, but something already unfolding around them. Some of these texts describe the final age as unfolding in 4 stages. The first is the age of forgetting, when people gradually stop seeking truth altogether. The second is the age of spectacle, where constant noise and entertainment begin to replace wisdom and reflection. The third is the age of the false shepherd, when corrupt leaders use the name of God to gain power and control. And the fourth, perhaps the most unsettling, is called the Great Silence. This silence isn't peaceful. It's described as a spiritual emptiness, a time when the connection between heaven and earth feels so distant that even those searching for meaning struggle to feel it. But the message doesn't end there. These writings say that at the deepest point of that silence, something changes. The fire returns, not to destroy the world, but to awaken it one final time. And despite all the warnings, the conclusion carries a powerful note of hope, something many believe wasn't emphasized in Western traditions. The message is simple, but profound. The end isn't the end of life, it is the end of the lie. In these writings, the message is clear. What's coming isn't destruction for the sake of chaos. It's a cleansing. A stripping away of everything false. And there's also a promise woven into it. Those who chose truth and love, even when the world chased comfort and power, won't be forgotten. They won't be recognized by status or success, but by what they endured. Their scars, not their crowns. This vision of the end times isn't about escaping the world. It's about transformation. If the Ethiopian Bible truly preserved a deeper version of these teachings, then it raises an important question. What warnings might these ancient texts be pointing out about our world right now? According to these traditions, the Ethiopian texts present a much more detailed picture than what most people know from the Book of Revelation. They describe not just events, but deeper signs. Things that must unfold within the human soul and what it really means to be aware when that final moment approaches. These writings claim that after his resurrection, Jesus shared a layered prophecy that never made it into the widely known Gospels. For centuries, Ethiopian monks carefully preserved these teachings, believing they held a kind of blueprint for the end of the age. One of the most striking ideas is that most people will misunderstand the signs. Instead of recognizing what's happening around them, they'll look for dramatic events in the sky while missing the deeper changes happening in everyday life. The texts describe things like the breakdown of families, the commercialization of love, and an intense focus on the self as the real indicators that something bigger is unfolding. A powerful line suggests that when a generation begins to center everything around its own image, it may be closer to the turning point than it realizes. It's the kind of idea that feels especially relevant today, living in a world shaped by self-image, personal branding, and digital identity. Another part of this Ethiopian prophecy speaks about what it calls the 2 harvests. It describes a time when 2 opposite forces grow side by side, a deepening darkness and a powerful awakening happening at the same time. In other words, it's not a simple story of the world steadily getting better. It's a moment of contrast where both extremes rise together and people are forced to choose which direction they follow. It presents a powerful and almost overwhelming idea. A world being pulled in 2 opposite directions at the same time. The darkness grows deeper, the light grows stronger, and the space in between, the comfortable neutral middle, slowly disappears. In these writings, Jesus tells his disciples that a moment will come when no one can remain undecided. There will be no more hiding in the gray. Every person will have to choose where they stand. Before his ascension, these texts say Jesus described something called the 7 seals of the heart. Unlike the dramatic cosmic imagery in the Book of Revelation, these seals are deeply personal and in many ways more unsettling. The first is the seal of comfort, the tendency to avoid truths that challenge us. The second is the seal of pride, the belief that we already understand everything we need to. The third is the seal of fear, placing safety above truth or growth. The fourth is the seal of distraction, filling every quiet moment so deeply that there's no space left to reflect or truly listen. The fifth is the seal of false community, surrounding ourselves only with voices that agree with us. The sixth is the seal of false mercy, using forgiveness as an excuse to avoid real change. And the seventh, described as the most dangerous, is the seal of religion itself, using sacred language or rituals as a shield to avoid a genuine, living connection with God. According to these teachings, breaking these seals isn't easy, but it's necessary. When someone does, they don't just wait for change, they become it. The fire they were looking for from the sky begins within them. Many people feel this message speaks directly to the modern world. A time filled with comfort, constant distraction, and powerful systems that sometimes use spiritual language for influence. It describes a world where people can feel both constantly connected and deeply alone at the same time. At its core, the Ethiopian view of the end times is both unsettling and freeing. It suggests that what's ending isn't the world itself, but the illusion surrounding it. And those who let go of that illusion, who face truth honestly and choose love, won't just endure what's coming. They'll help shape what comes next. If these preserved teachings within the Ethiopian Bible carry this kind of message, it raises an intriguing thought. Could Ethiopia itself have played a role in safeguarding these ideas for a reason? The story most people know is familiar. Jesus was betrayed, suffered, and was crucified. A message shared in churches across the world and reflected in scripture, art, and tradition. But there's another layer preserved in ancient Ethiopian manuscripts. Some of these texts claim that before his ascension, Jesus gave his disciples something more. A final prophecy, a detailed and intense vision of what the last days would look like. Among Ethiopian scholars, this is sometimes referred to as the prophecy of the final witness. And unlike softer interpretations, this account doesn't dilute the message. It presents it with striking clarity and intensity. It doesn't speak in vague symbols. It calls things out directly. It frames the timing in spiritual terms and describes the kind of generation that will live through it in a way that feels almost unsettling to a modern reader. The Ethiopian Orthodox Church, one of the oldest Christian traditions in the world, traces its roots back to Menelik I. The First. Unlike the spread of Christianity through the Roman Empire, Ethiopia's faith grew through prayer, fasting, and deep spiritual discipline rather than political power. Within ancient monasteries in places like Lalibela and Aksum, monks preserved sacred texts written in Ge'ez, an ancient Ethiopian language. These writings describe a version of Jesus who didn't just speak about personal salvation, but also offered a powerful warning about a future where truth itself would be rejected. In this telling, Jesus explains that the final witness won't be a dramatic cosmic sign or an angelic figure. Instead, it will be the generation of ordinary people who rise up during the darkest moments of the last days and refuse to stay silent. According to the text, these people won't be embraced by those in power. They'll be dismissed, ignored, and pushed aside. But their message will still reach those who are ready to hear it. Not through massive platforms or public attention, but on a much deeper, personal level. There's also a powerful idea here. Truth doesn't depend on visibility or approval. Even when voices are silenced, the message itself can still endure. Some Ethiopian theologians believe that teachings like this were intentionally left out of mainstream Christianity. They often point to the First Council of Nicaea, when early church leaders under Roman influence helped shape which texts would define Christian belief for centuries to come. According to this view, prophecies suggesting that corruption could arise within the church itself were considered too controversial to include. The idea that false leaders in the final days might appear outwardly religious, Using symbols of faith while acting against its core values was seen as especially threatening. So these teachings were set aside while traditions like Ethiopia's continued to preserve them. Whether someone sees these writings as literal history or symbolic warning, the message still carries weight. It invites people to look at the world around them and ask difficult questions. Are we closer to that kind of age than we think? Are we living in a time that mirrors these descriptions? And if so, how do we respond? The prophecy of the final witness may not appear in most Western Bibles, but its message doesn't feel distant or outdated. In many ways, it feels immediate, like something that speaks directly to the present moment. If the hidden end times teachings preserved in Ethiopia really challenge what many of us thought we knew about the last days, then it raises a bigger question. What makes this ancient independent land so unique? Why has it been able to protect ideas that feel both deeply unsettling and strangely hopeful? To understand that, you have to look at Ethiopia itself. It's one of the oldest civilizations on Earth with a history that stretches back thousands of years. Its identity has been shaped by resilience, strong spiritual traditions, and a deep sense of continuity. Unlike most African nations, Ethiopia was never fully colonized, and that independence allowed it to preserve its culture, beliefs, and sacred writings in a way few others could. Many Ethiopians believe their roots trace back to Ham, a tradition also mentioned in ancient Jewish records. Because of this, Ethiopia is often seen as more than just a nation. It's viewed as a living link to the biblical world and one of humanity's earliest spiritual centers. Faith has always been central to Ethiopian life. Long before Christianity spread across Europe, it had already taken hold in Ethiopia. Historical records show that Christianity was established there as early as the 4th century, not forced by empire, but embraced and protected by the people. In the 6th century, the traveler Cosmas Indicopleustes described Ethiopia as a deeply rooted Christian nation. He also noted that Ethiopian rulers offered refuge to Christians fleeing persecution, providing safety at a time when few places would. Some traditions even claim that certain Ethiopian communities have practiced their faith continuously for thousands of years, making it one of the oldest enduring Christian traditions, older than many well-known branches of the church today. At the center of all this is the Ethiopian Bible, one of the most complete and unique biblical collections in existence. While versions like the King James Bible contain 66 books, the Ethiopian canon includes many more. Among them are texts like the Book of Enoch and the Book of Jubilees, writings that don't appear in most modern Bibles. What makes these texts even more remarkable is that they were preserved in Ge'ez, an ancient language that very few people today can read. Because of that, much of the world remained unaware of their contents, including the more detailed end times ideas now being talked about again. That's why recent attention from figures like Mel Gibson has sparked so much curiosity. It has brought global focus back to these ancient writings and raised the possibility that they contain perspectives many people have never encountered before. The Ethiopian biblical tradition itself exists in different forms, including a broader and a narrower canon. Over time, leaders like Haile Selassie recognized one version as official, while scholars continued to study the wider collection, some believing it holds additional teachings and warnings that feel especially relevant today. All of this contributes to a powerful idea that Ethiopia's long independence, its deep-rooted faith, and its preserved texts may have allowed it to safeguard perspectives that developed differently from those shaped in Roman Europe. Whether someone sees these teachings as historical truth, spiritual symbolism, or cultural tradition, the message invites reflection. It suggests that some of the oldest roots of these ideas may not lie where many expect, but in a land that held on to its traditions while much of the world changed around it. What do you think about the Ethiopian Bible and these lesser-known teachings about the end times?